The air inside the dig site was thick with the scent of ancient dust and the faint metallic tang of tools left too long in the damp. Dr. Alara Voss adjusted the strap of her headlamp, the beam cutting through the gloom as she brushed away another layer of sediment. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from the chill of the underground chamber but from the weight of what she might uncover. This was no ordinary excavation. The ruins beneath the surface of Kepler 452b were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, older, stranger, and imbued with a quiet, almost haunting elegance. Alara was not alone in her work. Beside her, Professor Kian Morrow, a linguist with a reputation for deciphering the indecipherable, crouched low, his sharp eyes scanning the symbols etched into the walls. His presence was a comfort, though his silence often unnerved her. Kian was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was with a precision that cut through ambiguity like a laser. Across the chamber, Ria Solis, a musician turned xenocultural anthropologist, hummed softly as she ran her fingers over a series of raised glyphs. Her voice, though barely audible, seemed to resonate with the chamber itself, as if the walls were listening. The trio had been drawn together by the promise of discovery, but what they found was more than any of them had anticipated. The civilization that had once thrived here had left behind no weapons, no signs of conflict, no evidence of war. Instead, they had left music. Every artifact, every inscription, every fragment of their existence seemed to sing with a harmony that transcended time and space. It was as if the very essence of their being had been woven into sound. Alara's breath caught as her brush revealed the edge of a smooth, obsidian-like stone. She worked carefully, her movements deliberate, until the object was fully exposed. It was small, no larger than her palm, but its surface shimmered with an iridescent sheen. As she lifted it, the stone emitted a low, resonant tone, vibrating in her hand as though alive. The sound was neither harsh nor discordant. It was a single, pure note that seemed to echo through the chamber and into her very bones. "What is that?" Ria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and curiosity. "I don't know," Alara admitted, her voice trembling, "but it's responding to us." Kian joined them, his gaze fixed on the stone. "It's not just a relic," he said after a moment. "It's a key to understanding them." The stone's tone shifted as Ria reached out to touch it, the note rising in pitch and complexity. It was as if the stone recognized her, as if it had been waiting for someone who could truly hear it. Ria's fingers danced over its surface, and the chamber filled with a melody that was at once alien and achingly familiar. The sound seemed to tell a story, one of creation and connection, of a people who had found unity not through dominance or fear, but through the shared experience of harmony. As the melody faded, the trio stood in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Alara felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Longing, perhaps, or regret. She had spent her life studying the remnants of lost civilizations, but this was different. This was not just a glimpse into the past. It was a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting both its potential and its failures. "We need to learn more," Kian said finally, his voice breaking the silence. "If this is how they communicated, how they lived, then we've only scratched the surface." Ria nodded, her expression thoughtful. Their music wasn't just art. It was everything, a way of understanding the universe and each other. Alara tightened her grip on the stone, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. "Then we have to go deeper," she said. "We have to understand what they knew, what they were trying to tell us." The chamber seemed to hum in agreement, the walls vibrating faintly as if in response to her words. Alara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not by anything malevolent but by something vast and ancient, something that had been waiting for them to find this place. As they packed up their equipment and prepared to return to the surface, Alara glanced back at the chamber one last time. The shadows seemed to shift, forming patterns that almost resembled faces, their expressions serene and knowing. She felt a chill run down her spine, but it was not fear that gripped her. It was anticipation. The stone in her hand pulsed softly, its tone a gentle reminder of the journey ahead. They had uncovered the first note of a symphony that had been silent for millennia, but the melody was far from over. Somewhere, deep within the ruins, the rest of the song was waiting, and Alara knew they would not rest until they had heard it in its entirety. As they emerged into the pale light of Kepler 452b's sun, Alara felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known in years. The ancient civilization had left behind a gift, but it was also a challenge to rise above the discord of their own history and find a new way forward. The stone's melody lingered in her mind, a whisper of what could be, and she knew that their work had only just begun. The research lab aboard the orbital station was a stark contrast to the shadowy depths of the dig site. Harsh, artificial light illuminated rows of sleek consoles and holographic displays, casting sharp reflections on the polished metal surfaces. Alara sat at the center of it all, the harmonic stone resting on a padded platform in front of her. Its iridescent surface caught the light, scattering faint rainbows across the room. The stone had been silent since their return, but its presence was palpable, as if it were waiting for the right moment to speak again. Kian leaned over a nearby console, his fingers flying across the interface as he analyzed the data they had collected. His brow was furrowed in concentration, and the faint glow of the screen highlighted the lines of exhaustion on his face. They had been working non-stop since their return, driven by a shared sense of urgency. The stone was more than an artifact. It was a puzzle, and solving it felt like the key to understanding the civilization that had created it. Rhea stood by the observation window, her gaze fixed on the curve of Kepler 452b below. The planet's surface was a patchwork of greens and blues, its beauty marred only by the faint scars of ancient cataclysms. She turned away from the view, her expression thoughtful. "It's not just about the music," she said, her voice breaking the silence. "It's about what the music represents. Harmony, connection, a way of being that's completely alien to us." Alara nodded, her eyes never leaving the stone. "We've always used sound as a tool or a form of expression, but for them it was something more. It was fundamental." Kian straightened, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "I think I've found something," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "The symbols on the walls of the chamber, they're not just decorative. They're a form of notation, a musical language." Rhea moved to his side, her eyes scanning the screen. "Can you translate it?" "Not yet," Kian admitted. "But if we can find a pattern, a structure, we might be able to recreate some of their compositions." Alara picked up the stone, feeling its familiar warmth in her hand. "What if we use this?" she suggested. "It responded to us before. Maybe it can help us now." The trio gathered around the stone, their anticipation palpable. Rhea reached out first, her fingers brushing its surface. The stone responded immediately, emitting a low, resonant tone that filled the room. Kian adjusted the console, capturing the sound and translating it into a visual pattern on the screen. The symbols from the chamber walls began to align with the notes, forming a coherent sequence. "It's working," Kian murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're decoding their language." As the melody grew more complex, the room seemed to come alive with sound. The notes intertwined, creating harmonies that were at once alien and achingly beautiful. Alara felt a strange sensation, as if the music were reaching into her mind, weaving itself into her thoughts. She glanced at Rhea and Kian, seeing the same wonder reflected in their eyes. But as the melody reached its crescendo, something shifted. The harmonies fractured, the notes clashing in a discordant cacophony. The stone's light dimmed, and the room fell silent once more. "What happened?" Rhea asked, her voice tinged with frustration. Kian studied the data, his expression grim. "It's not just a song," he said. "It's a warning. The civilization, they didn't just create music. They used it to maintain balance. And when that balance was disrupted, it led to their downfall." Alara's grip tightened on the stone. "What disrupted it?" Kian hesitated, his eyes scanning the screen. "There's a gap in the sequence, a missing piece. But from what I can gather, it was a conflict. Their first and only war. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Alara felt a chill run down her spine. A civilization that had thrived on harmony, undone by a single act of discord. It was a cautionary tale, one that felt all too relevant. "We need to find the rest of the sequence," Rhea said, her voice firm. "If we can understand what went wrong, maybe we can prevent it from happening again." Kian nodded, his determination mirrored in his eyes. "It won't be easy. The data is fragmented, and the stone's responses are unpredictable. But if we can piece it together, we might be able to uncover the truth." Alara placed the stone back on the platform, her mind racing. The melody they had heard was only a fragment, a glimpse into a much larger story. But it was enough to set them on a path, one that could lead to answers or to more questions. As they resumed their work, the stone pulsed softly, its light flickering like a heartbeat. Alara couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching them, guiding them. The ancient civilization had left behind a legacy, but it was also a challenge to rise above their own limitations and find a new way forward. The hours blurred together as they worked, the rhythm of their efforts punctuated by the occasional hum of the stone. Each note, each symbol, brought them closer to understanding, but also closer to the edge of something vast and unknowable. Alara felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that they were on the brink of something that would change everything. Finally, as the station's artificial night cycle began, Kian leaned back in his chair, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "I've reconstructed part of the sequence," he said. "It's not complete, but it's enough to give us a direction." Rhea studied the screen, her eyes widening as she took in the new data. "This isn't just a warning," she said. "It's a map to something they left behind." Alara's heart raced as she joined them, her eyes scanning the symbols. "What is it?" Kian's voice was steady, but there was a flicker of excitement in his eyes. "A repository, a place where they stored their knowledge, their music, their history. If we can find it, we might be able to uncover the rest of the story." The stone pulsed again, its light brighter now, as if in agreement. Alara felt a surge of determination. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. The repository was out there, waiting for them, and with it, the answers they sought. As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, Alara glanced at the stone one last time. Its light seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, a silent reminder of the connection they had forged. The ancient civilization had left behind a gift, but it was also a responsibility, one that she was ready to embrace. The melody was far from over, and Alara knew that the next note would be the most important one yet. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere of Kepler 452b, its hull shuddering as it breached the dense cloud cover. Alara gripped the armrests of her seat, her knuckles white, as the turbulence rattled the small craft. Outside the viewport, the landscape unfolded in a blur of greens and golds, the dense forests and jagged mountain ranges of the planet stretching endlessly. The coordinates Kian had deciphered from the stone sequence pointed to a remote region, far from their initial dig site. Somewhere in this wilderness lay the repository, the key to unlocking the rest of the ancient civilization's story. Rhea sat across from her, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her datapad. Her usual calm demeanor was tinged with an edge of anticipation, her eyes flicking occasionally to the harmonic stone, which rested in a secure case between them. The stone had been quiet since their departure, its light dimmed, as if conserving energy for what lay ahead. Kian, seated at the shuttle's controls, guided the craft with practiced ease, though his jaw was tight with concentration. "We're close," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of the engines. "The signal from the repository is faint, but it's there. It's responding to the stone." Alara leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "What do you mean, responding?" Kian adjusted the controls, bringing the shuttle into a slow descent. "It's like they're communicating. The stone's frequency matches the signal from the repository. It's as if they're part of the same system." The shuttle touched down in a clearing, its landing gear sinking slightly into the soft, moss-covered ground. The air outside was thick with the scent of vegetation, the sounds of unseen creatures rustling in the underbrush. Alara stepped out first, her boots crunching on the damp earth. The repository was close. She could feel it, a faint hum in the air that resonated with the stone in her hand. The trio moved cautiously through the forest, their path illuminated by the soft glow of the stone. The trees here were unlike anything on earth, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their leaves shimmering with an iridescent sheen. The deeper they went, the stronger the hum became, until it was almost a physical presence, vibrating in their chests. Finally, they reached it. The repository was a massive structure, its surface smooth and seamless, as if it had been grown rather than built. It rose from the forest floor like a monolith, its surface etched with the same musical symbols they had seen in the chamber. The stone in Alara's hand pulsed brightly, its light reflecting off the repository's surface. "This is it," Ria whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is where they stored everything." Kian approached the structure, his hand hovering over the symbols. "We need to activate it," he said, "but we'll need the stone." Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding. She placed the stone against the repository's surface, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, resonant tone, the symbols began to glow, one by one, until the entire structure was illuminated. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the air was filled with a symphony of sound, each note blending seamlessly into the next. The repository's surface shifted, panels sliding open to reveal a vast interior. The trio stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The walls were lined with more symbols, their light pulsing in time with the stone. At the center of the room was a pedestal, its surface smooth and unmarked. Alara approached the pedestal, the stone in her hand glowing brighter with each step. As she placed it on the surface, the room was filled with a blinding light, and the air seemed to vibrate with energy. Images began to form around them, holographic projections of the ancient civilization, their cities, their people, their music. The projections moved and shifted, telling a story that spanned millennia. The civilization had thrived on harmony, their music not just an art form but a way of life. They had used it to communicate, to heal, to explore the universe. But as their technology advanced, so did their ambition. They began to experiment with the fundamental forces of the cosmos, using their music to manipulate reality itself. The projections shifted, showing the first signs of discord. A group of their scientists, driven by curiosity and pride, had created a device that could amplify their music to unimaginable levels. But the device was unstable, and its activation caused a catastrophic imbalance. The once harmonious civilization was plunged into chaos, their music twisted into a weapon. The final projection showed the repository being sealed, the last act of a people who had realized too late the cost of their hubris. The stone was left behind, a beacon for those who might one day seek to learn from their mistakes. The light faded, and the room fell silent. Alara felt a weight settle in her chest, the enormity of what they had witnessed pressing down on her. The civilization story was a warning, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Kian broke the silence, his voice quiet but firm. "We can't let this happen to us. We have to share this knowledge, but we have to be careful. If this technology falls into the wrong hands," Ria nodded, her expression grim. "We need to find a way to protect it, to make sure it's used for good." Alara picked up the stone, its light now steady and calm. "We'll find a way," she said. "We have to." As they left the repository, the forest seemed quieter, the hum of the structure fading into the background. The weight of their discovery hung heavy in the air, but so did a sense of purpose. They had uncovered the truth, but their work was far from over. The shuttle's engines roared to life as they prepared to leave, the repository disappearing into the distance. Alara stared out the viewport, the stone resting in her lap. The melody of the ancient civilization still echoed in her mind, a reminder of what had been lost, and what could still be saved. The journey ahead would be difficult, but they were ready. The stone's light pulsed softly, a silent promise of the challenges and triumphs to come. The symphony was far from over, and Alara knew that the next movement would be the most important one yet.